When first hearing the words, "Remember Ludlow," what comes to mind? To most people, it seems like a question. Do you remember Ludlow? Labor history in America has been greatly obfuscated and removed from the public's memory. Instead of asking just if people remembered Ludlow, the statement is a call to remember this event in America's labor history and to bring it into more of the public's consciousness. So what happened at Ludlow, and why should we remember it? At the beginning of the 20th century in Colorado, there were a series of strikes between miners and their employers. These strikes slowly grew more violent until they reached a peak during the Ludlow Massacre of 1914. There are many reasons why these strikes became increasingly violent, but the best explanation for it is the increasing amount of isolation that these miners felt and the heightened class relations which they experienced. These miners mainly faced isolation through the company towns that they lived in, which had very little infrastructure to move from town to town, and where the companies provided the backing for a lot of the infrastructure in the town. So they were isolated from the outside community and were unable to look for new work in different towns. Mining during this period was also especially dangerous. Being a job with many fatalities and very little safety practices, it led to growing tensions between the workers and their employers. When the strike first began, miners and their families stopped working and remained in the company towns, picketing and protesting for better treatment from their employers. Because the employer of these strikers was one of the largest mining companies in the country, Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, owned by John D. Rockefeller, Rockefeller and his wealth had influence over the local and state governments of Colorado, and he used this influence to evict miners from their homes using the Colorado Guard and to push them into a tent colony in Ludlow, Colorado. The strikers remained here through one of Colorado's harshest winters. One morning in early April 1914, there was supposed to be a meeting between the leaders of the strikers and the leaders of the militia which was defending the mines. This meeting ended with the leader of the strikers being assassinated. Full-scale war broke out on the tent colony. Both the strikers and the militia had weapons, and the National Guard set up a Gatling gun that was spraying into the tent colony. After several hours of fighting, the Guard pushed their way into the camp and began burning down the settlement, eventually killing 11 children and 2 women who were hiding in bunkers underneath the tents. This pushed the strikers outside of the colony and forced them to resettle into a different area. This historical blip rarely shows up on people's radar, but exemplifies America's bloody underbelly to its own history. This event was not only significant at that time, but when looking at it from today's context, or remembering it, it highlights the current power structure that we exist under that was exaggerated under the company towns. The labor militancy which was shown from these miners is something which is often forgotten today. By remembering this event, we remember that these people were pushed out of their homes into a tent colony. They lost everything they had and were still able to be militant and keep up a strike, with dwindling supplies during the winter. This type of militancy is what we forget or don't remember today.